Good evening. We're going to call tonight's meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, October 12th, 2021. This meeting is being video and audio recorded for future cable broadcast. Please silence all cell phones for the duration of the meeting, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everyone could please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So we do have a couple of members missing tonight. Mr. Tebbs will not be joining tonight's meeting, and Ms. Scombs should be here, but she'll be arriving late. Okay. So we're going to begin with the approval of minutes, payroll, and warrants. If I could please request a motion of approval, please, for the minutes of September 14th, 2021.
I move that question.
Okay.
The motion.
All right.
Second.
Second. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. If I could also request a motion of approval of the executive session minutes of August 17th, 2021. Those are not to be released.
I make the motion. Go ahead, Mr. Tiff.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Second that.
All right. Thank you. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Finally, requesting a motion of approval, please, on payroll and warrants.
I make that motion to accept the payroll and warrants.
All right. Thank
I
you.
second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Okay. At this time, we'd like to welcome our delegation. So members of the public, if you'd like to come up to the podium, make comment on any items on our agenda this evening. We're still doing a sign-in. Okay. Anybody would like to sign up? No? Okay. Great. Then we'll move on to old business. Dr. Bailey, if you could give us an update on the mask mandate.
Yep, so right now there is no update that impacts Acushnet because we're elementary and middle school. So we are continuing to wear the masks. So I don't have any update tonight.
And it's through November 1st at this point per DESI?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
And we have weekly meetings, so when I get news, I will definitely share it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
No, it's just that remind folks that that's still at the State Board of Education requirement.
Yes,
Correct.
yep. So we are required to wear masks indoors, not outdoors, and we're not seeing any issues with our students or staff, for that matter, wearing masks.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Mhm.
All right, new business, Dr. Bailey?
Sure. So the first order of business I have is a personnel report. You see, according to the report that I gave you, that we have 6 new staff members and 1 transfer. And other than that, that's the only changes since last month. Does anybody have any questions?
Are there any vacancies at this point?
I think Mrs. Flynn's going to be going over some of that in her report tonight, so I'd rather ask if we can hold off until then. We probably do have a couple for
Excellent.
sure,
Okay.
but nothing, one math that I know we're really trying to get, but we'll definitely bring that up during her report.
Okay.
The next order of business is retirement recognition, and at this time, I just want to mention that we had a few staff members who retired who could not make it tonight, but we did celebrate them outside of this meeting, and that would be Andrea Curtis, Donna Fernandez, and Gail LeBlanc. But we do have one teacher with us, Melissa Desjardins, and I'd ask Mr. Johnson if he could come up and speak about Mrs. Desjardins. And if you want to come up too, I would love for you to stand with him, and we're going to celebrate you tonight, Melissa.
Your moment.
Yes.
All right, so I have a few words. I'm really happy to be able to speak about Melissa tonight, even though I've only known you for a few years. I know how much, teaching and education has meant to you. So Melissa started in Acushnet back in 2005. If you know me, I like some numbers. So that was about 16 years ago. And if she had about 18 students on average, then you impacted about 300 students, elementary students' lives. And that's pretty impressive. Some of the things that you really shined at and were proud of was creating such a welcoming environment for your students. especially the morning meetings in the morning. I would come down the hallway, and there were so many times when she would be like, Mr. Johnson, come in and join us at our morning meeting. And I'd sit down with them, and they'd all have their special way of greeting each other in the morning, and you were so proud of those moments. And then there were other times, like during the holidays, when she took a lot of pride in second grade events, creating them, like the Grinch coming at Christmas time and reading to the students and being dressed up. And then there were some other times, like when COVID came and you weren't super strong in technology and you were a little nervous, and then she did it. She did it, like amazing. She didn't back down, and she pushed through and learned a new skill just like her students did, and that was totally amazing. And then about your team, you loved your team, and your team loved you, and they loved working with you and collaborating with you. And I know that when you were out last year, you were sorely missed by the team, and they thought about you all the time. So, Melissa, I want to wish you the best. And one of the things that's kind of become a tradition at the elementary school is when the fourth graders leave and embark on their new journey, we give them an Acushnet Elementary School drawstring bag. So I thought it would be appropriate to give you one as you move on. As you move on to your next stage, being retirement. So there's that for you. And then also the gift from the district. So congratulations.
I forgot about that computer. I blocked it out. I just,
Mr. Johnson, will
wanna
you
say
put the
first-
microphone, there you go.
sorry. I was going to wear my Wildcat mask, but it didn't match my outfit. For those who know me, know I would never leave teaching a second before I had to. So this retirement is really a disability retirement, and it's been very difficult. But it's been a lot of silver linings and a lot of gifts, and knowing how people feel about me and how I feel about them. I've been reflecting quite a bit. I always seem to be blessed with a very diverse class every year, ending with inclusion classes for the last 3 years or so, 4 years. And, I learned a few things, basic tenets that I've always kind of carried with me. First, that kids want to be kept safe from themselves, that there are no bad kids, and that my job is to get children to love coming to school and to see themselves as capable, lifelong learners. Recently, and it's never happened before, but over the last year and a half, kids have run into me or gone out of their way to find me, sending me Dr. Seuss masks and emailing me. And usually, a lot of the time, they were the kids that might have been considered a little lost. I had students with terrible times in math, and I just ran into one, and I saw him from afar, and I thought I recognized him, and he caught my eye, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and he was one that just like went blank when you put anything numbers on the board. And now he's a business major and wants to be a financial advisor. So I said, you message me when you get your degree, because I'm going to need all the help I can get. My former students of mine are entrepreneurs, business majors, healthcare workers. And by healthcare workers, some are physical therapists, some are aides, some are speech therapists, getting their doctorate to be the same. And my favorite story is not too long ago, I had a little one that was going through a very difficult time in second grade. And I won't tell you how many years ago, but you'll figure it out soon enough. But writing and expressing himself was very difficult at that time. And people kind of teased me, my colleagues, because I basically at one point sat next to him, being his scribe, his secretary, we called it, while I was teaching the class. And I ran into him where he was working, and I said, "Oh, you like it here?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, I just do this part-time until school gets started again. I go, oh, you go to school? And in my heart, I'm saying, please say Fairhaven High School. And he said, yeah, I'm going to Bridgewater State. And I'm like, oh, that's wonderful. And what are you going for? And he gave me a look and kind of a half smile. And he said, I'm going to be a teacher. And I said, well, I hope you had some good power of examples along the way. And I winked, and he said, well, I know I had one. So I'm speaking for myself, but all the teachers here have these stories. And in this system and on the planet. And the last thing I just want to say, and I was talking today that a little bit of soapboxy stuff here, but when I think about the things that have changed not for the better, when I was in college and my now husband was helping me cut out 1,000,000 eggs, and we were doing this extraordinary bulletin board for vocabulary around Easter time, That passion and being all excited about making games and knowing what your kids needed and trying to reach them in a way that made sense to them, we had time for self-expression. I had a coffee house in 3rd grade, the Tri-Works, Wildcat style, we called it, and of course none of the kids knew what the Tri-Works were, but once we started going to the Whaling Museum, they found out where the name came from. But they got to show their talents off while we waited for the buses. And in the morning meetings, those were places where they got to express themselves. And we talked about how they felt about certain books and authors. And, they would create things, and then they would write about them. But we had all these teachable moments. A storm would happen, so we'd stop what we were doing and learn about, blizzards or whatever. It's unfortunate that a lot of that has had to change, whether it be because of COVID or expectations from a higher level. Books are our tools of the trade. They take us places. And, I was hoping to get together a book swap box, and I just couldn't do it in time for this meeting. But, our library was such a precious place, and we've all had to pivot and deal with all these changes. I'm not exclusive by any means. And I just hope that soon we can get back to remembering what was really important, and especially at this age, the elementary school age. We do set the foundation for these kids for the rest of their lives, and it's an important calling and calling. And so I'm going to end the way I started my first newsletter ever, and every newsletter since. It's been an honor and a privilege to be a teacher and to work for you. And things don't always go according to plan, but I hope that this isn't the last time you'll see me around. I just need to keep continuing to take care of myself, and once I do and I can be consistent, then you're not going to get rid of me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Desjardins. I would just like to add, every time I walked into your classroom, I always saw the joy and felt the joy that you and your students were experiencing, and that is the truth. I want to thank you for that, because it was always a pleasure for me as a superintendent to walk into your classroom and see the great teaching and learning that was happening. And speaking of joy, I can remember on one of the April Fool's Day, your kids came out with a plate of brownies, and it was covered, and they said, Dr. Bailey, would you like some brownies? So I said, sure. So what did I get but a cutout of the letter E, and it was a brown construction paper E, a brown E. And that's the thing, the kids were always happy, and you were as well, always. And what you said is so true. If you can come back at some point, we'd be more than happy to have you with your skill set. Wonderful job all these years for the children of Acushnet. And I'll see you in the supermarket, right? We always seem to bump into each other, so thank you. We're on that same schedule, so thank you so much for everything.
Yes, thank you so much. It clearly your passion is so clear, and it's obviously you've brought so much creativity and spirit to what you've done here. So you're going to be missed, really. Thank you so much for your dedication to the district.
Okay, so next up, we have Jean Sheridan is going to talk about the food supply shortage. I would ask her to go to the podium. And as you know, you've probably heard there is a shortage, but we want to reassure people that we are going to make sure that our children are fed. So,
I think that's it in a nutshell. It's unprecedented times. I got an email at 6 o'clock this morning that said, your last 2 deliveries from our primary grocery supplier may be delivered this week, but they may not get there until next week. So what we're knowing on every level of everything we buy, from lunch trays specifically to chicken, because we can have any variety of chickens that we have. I think we want to really just let the parents know that the lunch staff is working as hard as they can to eliminate substitutions, to lessen substitutions, but all the balls are in the air. We have learned to buy from the state contract. I happen to know now Tyson isn't producing chicken because they don't have the oil to fry the chicken in. So it just goes to that level as you go into Target or if you go into anywhere and you see the changes. So in the word of pivot that we all sort of hate, we are pivoting. We're limiting the number of items we're serving. We're making substitutions as we can or have to. I think the biggest part of that is working directly with our the kids with allergies and with the nurses, because one chicken product, we're back to chicken again, but one chicken product has egg in it, one doesn't have egg in it. So if the kids have those sensitivities, we need to be very much on target and letting people know, and letting parents know to contact me, contact their managers. We now have the ability with our online menu program to switch out. So instead of just having a chicken patty, we now have a Gold Kiss chicken patty, a Tyson chicken patty, a Rich Chicks chicken patty. So whatever comes in the door, we're changing that out daily. But the challenge is there. This week's challenge was little baby carrots. We got shorted, 12 cases of baby carrots. So differences, astounding. I think, we're doing a lot of things really well. The lunches, or the breakfasts, which are going home with all the elementary kids, and as an option here, are working. We see our lunch participation skyrocketing. As you know, all meals are free. If prior to COVID, we had about a 50% participation in our lunch program, it's now closer to 70.
Wow.
So, there's the kid who's never going to get lunch here regardless of what it is, but I think we're giving lunch to a lot more kids, and, we continue to work as hard as we can to be sure they're nutritionally sound and make sense. So I don't know if you have any questions or,
I mean, I appreciate the fact that you're juggling all of this right now, and I just think it's important that our families understand that we need to be a little flexible in these times, and I know that we're going to communicate through social media just to let families know when there is an issue, but no one's going to go hungry. We're going to make sure that we feed all of our kids.
absolutely.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions?
Yes,
for Mrs.
is
Sheridan?
this reaching a crisis level, or is it now more of an acute planning level?
It's an acute planning level at this point. We are used to having a lot of balls in the air. So, if we had one major grocery supplier, we've now gone to the state bid to find out who else we can get. We found out that our pizza man stocks chicken. So it's planning. It's balls in the air right now. It is not crisis in my mind. I'm praying it doesn't get to that point. I mean, a lot of people in the Midwest, you hear, for some reason, are a little bit more challenged. But for right now, we just, every morning, we figure out what we need and where we're gonna get it from. And more importantly, to go back to what I started with, it's pray it's gonna show up. The average order is short 25% of what we've ordered. It's very, very different times.
I'm
short
sure the
and
State
probably
Department,
delayed
excuse me.
as well, right?
I'm sorry?
Are you getting delays as well as the shortage?
Well, yeah, again, delays. We don't have, as of today is Tuesday, the Tuesday after a 3-day weekend. Last week's deliveries have not been to come yet.
Yeah, yeah.
And the only promise she made is maybe in another week, we will have gotten the last week's deliveries. So it's craziness. We've instructed all of the managers to have 2 weeks' worth of food on hand at all points. Yeah, it's the best that we can do, and that is what's going to cause the subs as we need to have to do the substitutions.
Well, I appreciate everything that you and your staff are doing, so thank
And
you so
just-
much.
Just one question. Has the State Department of Education indicated to you that they're aware of issues like, because other communities are the same way? It's not,
There
not-
is no difference. They're giving
Are they
us,
trying to cope with it, trying to put pressure on
I don't think they
distributors to come forth and all that?
well, what they're doing with us is they're giving us waivers. So if there are now waivers that you don't have to meet we have you have to have 11 different vegetables in a given week, and they have to be different colors. So we're waived on that. We're waived on different flavors of milk. So, yes, and they're going to be they're much easier on the procurement piece, where a year ago, you'd be in the fire. That's not, they're just saying, we know we need food.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and my last plug is this is National School Lunch Week, so again, our lunch ladies are as good as any I've ever seen, and we just always need to appreciate them. Thank you.
And we appreciate you too,
Thank
our
you.
wonderful nutrition director. Thank you so much, Mrs.
Thank you so
Sheridan.
much for the update.
Okay, the next order of business is my evaluation and my goals. So in your packets, I had attached several things, and I'm going to go over a couple very quickly and then one more in depth. The first is just a memo outlining my goals. The second is the self-assessment, which just outlines where I believe I'm at with all of the standards, with the 4 standards. And one of the things that's different this year that I'm proposing to the committee is 4th-year superintendent, similar to teachers, it would be recommended to do a 2-year plan versus a 1-year plan. So my first 3 years, it was a 1-year plan each year. The difference would be at the end of this school year, instead of doing a summative evaluation, we would do what's called a formative evaluation, which is very similar. It's still an evaluation, but then we would tweak the goals along the way for next year. It's a working document, but for the most part, I've outlined what the committee has discussed with me in terms of, really trying to make these more smart goals. So if you look at this sheet right here, which is the educator goals, and it says 2021 to 2023, and it looks like boxes. The first goal is the student learning goal, and that's the one I'm probably going to talk the most about. During the 21 to 23 school years, all students will receive consistent access to grade level work with targeted scaffolds and interventions to make grade level standards accessible as measured by the implementation of a district educator goals menu, and this is brand new to everybody this year, with a measurable goal options in the areas of literacy, math, science, or social studies. And again, at middle school, you have content area teachers, so they'll be picking their specific content area. A little bit different at the elementary level, where they can pick, and again, these goals have to be agreed upon. So this is the menu that I also put in the packet that gives you examples of measurable goals. For example, if we looked at the STAR assessments, it would be moving, if, let's say, grade 2 teacher wanted to move 10% from the red, which would be warning, to yellow, needs improvement, 10% from green, proficient, to purple, advanced, and 60% yellow, needs improvement, to green, proficient. And we believe those numbers will get our kids to where they need to be. And a little bit later on tonight, Ms. Ruggieri and I are going to be going over the MCAS results. So I think these goals will help with that, 'cause all of these assessments are aligned and it's supposed to help with MCAS. because MCAS is a test on standards. So that's the goal. And then underneath that goal in that same column, you have the strategies. So some of the things that we're going to be, I just talked about the menu that teachers would have. Purchase and provide professional development on intervention programs. Increase interventionists at the elementary school. Alter school schedules to support response to intervention teacher collaboration teams. So we've worked really hard, and we're continuing to work hard to get teachers that planning time that they so desperately need. Ensure implementation of approved district curriculum and programs, and they're listed there, but we've done a lot of work over the last couple of years to start to pilot some of these new curriculum programs and purchase them and start to use them, and we're going to talk more about that tonight when we talk about the MCAS results. Ensure timely implementation of assessments. Ensure new curriculum is being followed through the use of district pacing guides, so that, again, one of the things when I came in on my listening tours is that a lot of the families and teachers said no one's aligned. That was a big problem in the district. So now we have pacing guides, and it doesn't mean if I'm on a teacher and I'm doing something on a Tuesday and it's not exact to what you're doing on Tuesday, that's okay, but for the most part, we're following that same district plan, the pacing guide. Ensure collaboration with grade level vertical teams, academic coaches, TIS, and administration. And as you remember, TIS is the Technology Integration Specialist. Ensure collaborative teams continuously monitor students' understanding and make adjustments. Ensure that systems support opportunities for individualized needs. Build teaching capacity through PD opportunities to ensure strong grade-appropriate instruction with just-in-time scaffolds and targeted interventions. And again, going back, carrying out recommendations as outlined in the curriculum and assessment audit. So a lot of these things are continuing from my first 3 years. We're not just starting new things. We're still looking at that curriculum audit to make sure that we're following the recommendations, and that includes a lot of the new curriculum. We do learning walks at both buildings with the administration, and then our hope is to bring in the teachers into those learning walks so we can look at best practices. Facilitate consistent one-to-one meetings with district and school-based leaders. Participate in the NSIP regional consultancy program. So even though I graduated from the NSIP program officially, they offered a new regional consultancy group with the superintendents in the region, and we meet monthly, and that's another great resource. We're going to continue working towards developing all curriculum maps, assessments, and resources that are aligned within and across grade levels to the rigor set forth within the MAS frameworks, and prepare students for the academic opportunities in high school. Create an environment of shared leadership among district-wide faculty to promote a collegial culture. Again, that's been, we're really trying to grow our own bench here in Acushnet, and we've done so in the past few years where people are now getting certifications as administrators, really. And then I just list some resources. And then what I will plan to do is do a mid-year update similar to what I did last year. But you'll hear a lot of these things being discussed in and during school committee meetings. So that was goal number 1. Does anybody have any questions on goal number 1?
Yeah, just a general observation. You're courageous. You're putting a lot on yourself, so to speak. These measurable goals and so forth, you use the term "we." How is it going to be implemented, and will principals and whoever evaluates the staff and so forth involved in the evaluation process, will they have the same goals as far as what they have to do in the realm of their responsibility?
Yes, that's a great question. So a lot of the administrators are sitting here tonight, and they're waiting for the vote tonight, because once it's official, they take my goals, they work on similar goals for themselves that we agree to. They do the same type of work with their teachers, and already the teachers have been accessing this menu, which we've never done before. This was as a result of our last conversation that we had in a workshop about more measurable type goals. So my feeling on goals is, this is a goal, we should aim high. If we make it here, that's great, but we don't want to aim here. Do you know what I mean? So the second goal is my professional practice goal, to develop and implement lessons and activities from the South Regional Consultancy and continue to build my capacity as an effective leader within the Acushnet Public Schools. This one's pretty similar to the one that I've had in the past for NSIP, so I don't want to read the whole thing. But basically, I think it's important that a lot of the things that I'm doing in terms of starting with the listening tours and the entry findings and all these audits that we're doing, like a lot of that has stemmed from my work in the NSIP program. So that work will continue with what I've already done, but it will also continue with the South Regional group that I'm in now.
I just have a
So-
question.
Yeah.
Those listening tours that you did when you first came on board were so informative. You've now been with us, what, 3 years? I'm curious when you'll repeat that process, because just like any planning process, it's good to continuously get stakeholder
absolutely.
input. So is there a plan in which you would
Absolutely.
start to do listening tours again?
Absolutely. So we find that we get more input from surveys. When we did the listening tours, we did get a few people attend, and during COVID, we just figured the surveys, we actually did do a couple of online meetings. I'm more than happy, though, to do more in-person, but we will continue, and I believe that's in here somewhere with the surveys, because we do feel like through those surveys, we're getting a lot of people responding.
Yeah.
And we feel like that's valuable information to us. You know, the more input and insight that we can get from our families, our teachers, et cetera, all stakeholders really, it's helpful to the work that we're doing. So we will definitely continue with the surveys, but I'm more than happy to do in person, especially now where we're back in school. You know, we have the restrictions with the masks inside, but if people don't mind that, we're certainly happy to do some of those meetings again. Again, all of my PD falls under this one. And then if you go to, any questions on that one?
No?
Okay.
I just have one question, so,
Yeah.
and it's maybe, I'm just going to use one example. So just getting some more comfort from me around, you know, the kind of the quantitative side and how will we measure some of these things. So if I were to look at under strategies, this is under goal number 2, for example, and it says continue the implementation of district strategic plan. So at the end of the year, I think what can be challenging for me, and maybe the other committee members, because we're not here every day and we don't see this right firsthand, is just really trying to understand, to be fair, right? How do I evaluate you on that? Because the goal as written right here is broad, right? So what would be, how would you tell me?
So during school committee meetings, I would say that we would be presenting, like that's on the agenda for next month, is our district strategic plan. And that has all benchmarks. It's a 5-year plan. We just updated it. And it's got benchmarks, action steps. So I would say that you would look at where the district is in terms of, it's a 5-year plan, how much did we get done this year? Where are we at? And during these presentations monthly, you'll be getting updates on some of these things. And did you have a different idea?
No, I'm just, my only thought here on some of these is should we, and by the way, as a process, I think, you know, we got this over the weekend, right? And so now we're at a Tuesday meeting. It isn't a lot of time to like go through goals and then evaluate them. So I don't know if we're still, given that we're down 2 committee members, are we still planning to take a vote on this tonight?
I was planning on it.
Yeah.
So we can.
Yeah.
The reason why is because we have a date that our teachers have to have their goals done, and we're waiting for this vote so that we can finalize everybody else's. So I think the big one that I really wanted you to focus on was the student learning goal with that menu, because that is very different. But yeah, I mean, the superintendent has more of a balcony view on these things. And then the principals and the administration and teachers kind of take what I'm doing and they get more into the weeds of of these goals.
And I understand that. I'm just, as I look at this, again, my reaction on some of these is just, my initial thought is, geez, if I were to sit down and evaluate this at the end of the year, it isn't necessarily clear, just looking at this right now, exactly how I would decide whether you did a good job, great job, bad job, whatever. And I would just recommend that maybe moving forward when we do this is that maybe we have a meeting where we see it for the first time and we have some discussion and then we go back and refine it and we bring it forward for a vote at another meeting. I personally feel like, to get it over the weekend and then vote on it tonight is a relatively short turnaround for something as important as this. It's just my opinion.
I don't want to, speaking to that, another observation, and maybe I'm jumping the gun. First of all, I stress that, you have to start implementing the goals. You got to work down, because of it's not you, it's we, is going to meeting these goals, and I think that it's got to be right down the so-called ladder, number one. Number two, I didn't see mentioning of fiscal planning in order to meet those goals. In other words, if you have a certain goal, how much does it cost? What resources have you got to be putting into that in order to meet that goal? And then when you have, then you can develop a really comprehensive budget in order to implement your goals. So I didn't see too much of that and it really does say, for example, the person who's responsible, in meeting those benchmarks, you've become vulnerable, because you can say, well, we didn't meet them. Well, we didn't meet them because I didn't have enough staff in critical areas, especially in these times. So therefore, it should be, that planning should be basically into what is it going to cost, and do some fiscaling, and then if it fails to happen, it isn't just a personality thing of evaluation. It's more. So I hope I'm getting my point across on this one, but
Yeah, I understand your point, John. I think, though, we did approve a budget which had a number of resources in that. I'm assuming that as you're going through your planning, Dr. Bailey, you're taking into account the resources that we have budgeted in terms of teachers, faculty, staff to support you in the delivery of these strategies and tactics that will help us to achieve these goals.
Yeah, so I'd like to respond to that. So again, my goals are sort of, if you really wanted to put everything on here, this could probably be a 20-page document, right?
yeah.
But somebody like the business manager, Mrs. Flynn, looks at my goals, and part of her goals is going to be to develop a budget that is aligned with these goals.
Right, but I think that should be somewhat
think it should be somewhere.
included in the future. I don't want to derail the train at this point, but
Right.
I'm
But
trying to
see,
make a helpful
every
suggestion.
goal-
Ways, it's got to be, this is sort of a gradual process. If Dr. Bailey's going to do her planning in an inclusive manner, including the administrators and the staff going on down, we can't get into the weeds of those numbers so specifically. Otherwise, we'd be changing things. Unless it was an evolving plan, because
No, I
you're
can tell you that
trying to,
this was a very inclusive process with my administrative team, my leadership team.
and will continue to
And will
be.
continue to
This is
be.
like the foundation
Right.
that is going to allow deeper planning to happen through the principals, the teachers, and all the way down, right?
Right. So, for example, when Mrs. Flynn does her goals are going to be more focused on the budgetary, doing a budget with, the management and operations piece of it for what's outlined here. That would be her role.
Would it be helpful to be a little bit more clear about the types of resources that are going to be needed? For instance, like in the budget, we approved certain staff, for instance. There were a number of staff that we were, resources that we knew, specialists, things like that. Would it be helpful to
But
have that?
What I'm also, I have a different impression of the superintendent is the chief officer of the schools. The business manager reports and carries out what the chief officer is doing.
Yeah.
It's not, in my estimation, it's not the budget manager presenting a budget to the superintendent in order to meet goals. The superintendent should be telling the business manager, this is what I need, and develop a budget in order to meet those goals.
Yeah, we work together, I can honestly say.
No,
It's
but I say,
inclusive.
it's, I just want to say, the line, you know, the buck stops right there. It doesn't stop anywhere else. Okay?
Yeah, I don't disagree on that, yeah.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit here. I'm just going to continue, and then we can certainly have more discussion, but goal 3, let me go to goal 3, which is a district improvement goal. The last 2 goals, goals 3 and 4, are district improvement goals. Goal 3 is during the 21-20 to 23 school years, foster a sense of belonging and partnership among students and families as measured by the student and family surveys and attendance data. So again, I'm looking at trying to do something that's measurable. This goes along with DESE's Acceleration Improvement Plan. And we want to know this information. So it's very important. We can't do our work unless people really feel good about where they're at. So again, I outlined it. One of the differences in goal 3 is that the elementary school is going to be taking on PBIS now, adding that so that we will have a consistent model across the district. PBIS has been going on at the middle school, rewarding children for behavior, things like that. So we're going to have that happening now at the elementary level. Goal 4 is to continue to provide a safe and healthy learning environment that prioritizes the well-being of every Acushnet Public Schools community member during the global health pandemic. And the reason why I left this in is because this pandemic is still here. And I think it's really important that we continue to focus on the needs because they're changing each and every day. I mean, this year, one of the big things that I'll get to a little bit in the agenda is the test and stay program. So that's new. You know, I'm constantly meeting with DESE officials about the pandemic and about keeping our students and staff safe and the changes that are happening. So I think that was important to keep because, again, we are still in the midst of a pandemic.
I guess, I wouldn't argue that these are the right goals, I guess, and I could certainly get behind supporting the goals. I guess I would only ask the question to the rest of the committee. We have 2 folks who are not here, is do we move forward with a vote? And I'll certainly support these goals, but should we continue to look at these in the short term to say, do we need to add anything in terms of making some things clearer around how we're going to measure those goals at the end of the year, right? How we're going to evaluate what success is or isn't. And if the rest of the committee is comfortable with how it's written, that's fine. That's just my 2 cents around. And again, it's just to be fair to give myself, and I think some of the other members may have expressed this before, but just, again, so that at the end of the year, we have a little bit more of a framework to assess, was it good, was it great, was it whatever, right? And I think some of it, and maybe it's just getting some clarity around what we mean on some of these things in terms of how we'll do that, but to me, I think that's a missing piece.
So we use the superintendent's rubric, which I will send that to you, but it's the same rubric that we used last year for each of the standards and the elements under those standards. The one thing that I would say is if you have any concerns along the way, I would appreciate knowing about them in advance and not, it's similar to the way we treat our teachers, right? We wouldn't give them an evaluation with all kinds of things that they're not aware of or bad news. We, along the way and along the year, we talk to them about things that we might have concerns of, things that are going well. So I would expect that, as we've done in the past, that same courtesy as we move forward.
just a question that might, I don't know, help with some of your concerns, Ron. The way I see this is that this is the foundation, and that you're now going to, if approved, that you're going to take this now to the administrators and the teachers, and the next level of planning will start to uncover some of the quantifiables that we're looking for, so that at the end of the day, or at the end of the year, we can see where we are with that.
So for example,
Correct?
Yep.
Those are coming as deeper
Yes.
planning is.
so you're going to get reports throughout the year about assessments, and these are some examples in that menu. We might have a principal or a curriculum director present where our scores at. You're actually going to see some data tonight
Right.
on the MCAS, which is one test, and we don't want to judge our children on one test, right? But throughout the year, we continue to look at the data, and that kind of information you will be privy to. Presented to the school committee. So that'll be one example of the information that you have. When I talk about strategies in this document, you'll probably be hearing things, when I do a mid-year update in January or February about, where we've been, and hopefully it's not going to be all new to you, because at every monthly meeting, some of it all kind of.
Well, I know you use this to report back too, so,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I just remember last year at the end of the year looking at some of this stuff, and maybe it was me just being like, I'm not sure if I know how to evaluate this, right? So here's an example. So goal 3, it says foster the sense of belonging and partnership among students and families measured by student and family surveys, attendance data. Do we know what the baseline is, and then are we trying to drive to a certain?
Right, so this is brand new, so we are going to get baseline, and the idea is we want to see movement in the right direction. And the thing is, once we get the baseline, the teachers and the principals will know where their schools are at, because again, the schools will be in different places. So I can't really say as a district we're here, because the schools are in different places. They will then, in turn, look at that. Same with their attendance data. They could be in very different places for attendance. But the idea is, this is the balcony, and then it continues to get drilled down to, as we go down to the administrators, the teachers, we get more in the weeds of what you're, I think, talking about. We have never done this before. This is new. It's part of the acceleration plan from DESE that they just put out to help with learning recovery during the pandemic. So we thought that that was important enough that we put it on our goals, because that's a focus area that we want everyone to focus on in the district.
But I just want to add that this is a superintendent's recommendation. It's for us to either vote it up or vote it down, not to be fooling around with some of the verbiage, as far as I'm concerned. Secondly of all, it's October 12th. It's very imperative, in order to meet the goals, that they get the show on the road very, very quickly. This is not in August. This is in, testing has already taken place at the high school, for example. So time is of the essence, and it's a bold approach. I commend you for it, and it could be empirical in a sense of trying to see if it works and work it out. And but that takes time, and we can't have any more delays. Even though I take so I would, if the motion is made, that I move that we support the superintendent's recommendation on the evaluations.
Right, and just to point out, these goals have to be, we all have to be in agreement. So the school committee, as well as the superintendent, needs to be in agreement on what these goals are. So I guess the vote would be, if you are in agreement, to vote in support of these goals.
That's your recommendation. That means you're in agreement.
That's what I'm
I
recommending.
don't personally have I think that I trust your recommendations on this. I think, I'm very comfortable with what you've laid out here. I do think it's ambitious, but I think it's moving us in the right direction as a district, so.
And I'll just reiterate, again, I trust the goals. I'm not disputing the goals. I'm not suggesting these aren't the right things that the district should be focused on. So I'll support moving forward. I just want to make sure that we're clear when we get to the end of the year, or not just the end of the year, throughout the year, that we know what we're holding ourselves accountable to, and that we have a way to evaluate that.
Yeah.
And I do feel like last year and maybe it's on me, but I think some other folks expressed it, like there were some opportunities to maybe better clarify what we were holding ourselves accountable to. So that's all.
I think the key here is communication. So as we move forward, if there are things that you have questions about, concerns about, is just communicate with me, and it doesn't have to wait for the monthly meeting. You can call me anytime, email me, and I'm more than happy to sit down with you even to go over whatever it is you have questions about.
Madam Chair, a point of order.
Yeah.
A motion was made. I don't know if a second was made.
Yeah.
Was that a
Second? I was second. So all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, thank you. Okay, next, we have our MCAS results. I'm going to call Mrs. Ruggieri up to the podium. So we have it on the big screen, but you certainly have it in your packet as well. So either way that you want to look at this tonight. But I just want to remind folks that our students did take the MCAS last year. That's the data that we're going to be reporting on tonight. And it was definitely modified. So they, instead of taking the normal 2 sessions, students completed 1 session in shorter duration, okay? Also, what was different about testing last year was that the students, we had about 58 students in the TECA program. 41 of those students were MCAS eligible, the grades 3 through 8. So 41 students took the MCAS test remotely, which was very different. And we had to, I commend the people who basically worked with them on getting that test going remotely. Okay. So tonight we are going to go over the accountability, performance as a district, how we did as a school, each school, how we performed, considerations, and next steps. So the first thing is accountability. Typically, in the past, districts and schools have been held accountable by these measures: achievement, growth, English language proficiency, and then additional indicators such as absenteeism. But Department of Education, DESE did not issue any determinations this year or last year due to the pandemic. So I put this up there just to remind folks that this is what typically we were held accountable to, but nobody's determinations were necessarily changed. So everyone's sort of status quo as far as DESE goes. So the next one is just an overall summary of our achievement level. This reflects the entire district. Every grade level is mapped out by content. And what we'll do is we'll break down each one of those into more digestible slides, if you will. And I think the thing to look at here is the participation rate was really, really high. We were in the high 90s and 100% in all of our grade levels. So basically, this is a true reflection of all of the kids in Acushnet.
Okay, so we're going to start with the 8th grade and just kind of move on down to the 3rd grade with the data. So in each slide going forward, on the left side is going to be in the data box is going to be the percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations in the district compared to the state by subject area and grade. And then on the right, the graph is showing the comparison from the 2017, 18, 19, and 21 years. This is our own data. So here on this slide, it's the 8th grade ELA. And the district, kind of came in well below the state here. And so this is one area of concern, is the 8th grade ELA. The number of students in the partially meeting and not meeting increased. 8th grade math, 1 percentage point above the state. But again, compared to ourselves, we had more students falling into that not meeting or partially meeting expectations compared to our own performance in years prior. The 8th grade science, that assessment is an assessment of all the 6th through 8th grade standards. There's no science MCAS test in 6th or 7th grade. And again, an area of concern, we fell 10 percentage points below the district, below the state. Seventh grade ELA, 10 percentage points below the state. And again, we increased in the needs improvement and partially meeting expectations. Seventh
Tell you
grade,
it's going to get better. Go ahead.
we'll give you the bad news first.
Yeah.
The 7th grade math is, we came in 1 point below the state and also increased in the not meeting. And now for the better news. 6th grade, our students performed about 9 points above the state average, and we increased compared to our own to the district. We increased the number of students in the exceeding and meeting categories. 6th grade math came in 10 points. The district came in 10 points above the state percentage. 5th grade ELA, 18 points above the state percentage. And we significantly increased the number of students who are exceeding expectations in the 5th grade compared to the years prior. We went from 0 to 17 in exceeding expectations. In 5th grade math, the students performed 5 percentage points above compared to the state.
So can I ask a question? Mm-hmm. Probably the question a lot of people have. So what do you think? How do you assess that drop
So we have
between
that
7th and
in
8th?
considerations and next steps in the
Okay.
slideshow, so we definitely want to review that with you.
Okay.
We just thought it was important to go over all of the
Yep.
data.
5th grade science is the first science MCAS test that students take. So our students take a 5th grade MCAS and an 8th grade MCAS test. And the students came in 6 points above the state in 5th grade science. The elementary school, 4th grade ELA, students scored 23% higher than the state. Likewise in math, students in 4th grade math scored 31 points higher than the state average. Grade 3 ELA, 8 points above the state. Grade 3 math, 15% higher than the state. And then this data table just kind of shows the comparison, similar information to what was in the graphs. So this is comparing our district, district-wide ELA performance, grades 3 to 8. So what we always want to see is an increase in the column all the way to the left, the change from year to year. We always want to see an increase in the exceeding expectations in the meeting expectations line. And we want to see a decrease in the partially meeting and not meeting expectations.
So again, this is a district compilation of the grade 3 through 8, And what that basically shows is that even though we outperformed the state in many of our grade levels, we saw an increase in kids not meeting expectations, believe it or not. And we saw a decrease in meeting expectations, which makes sense.
With COVID.
Well, not necessarily, because everybody had COVID. We're comparing ourselves to the state. Everybody took the same MCAS last year. So we have some thoughts on that, but I will let Ms. Regari continue.
In math, fewer students were meeting and exceeding than, previous years, and we saw an increase in the partially meeting and not meeting. And again, this is grades 3 to 8 math. And now we have it broken down by school. There's the Acushnet Elementary, grades 3 and 4, and then the Ford Middle School, grades 5 to 8. And this is English Language Arts. So at the elementary school, we saw a decrease in students meeting and exceeding and an increase in students partially meeting and not meeting. And
Let me remind you, we have no ELA curriculum purchased during this year, right, at the elementary school.
Yep. And then we saw an increase at the Ford Middle School in students exceeding expectations, but a decrease in the meeting expectations and an increase in not meeting expectations.
And they were in year 1 of the ELA curriculum.
Yes. Mathematics, all grade levels were in year 1 of the new mathematics curriculum. This is district-wide math. So at the middle school, we saw a decrease in students meeting and exceeding overall, and an increase in the partially meeting and not meeting.
And again, I want to point out in math, it was the first year in the curriculum during the pandemic. A lot of things could not be done. Not only was it new curriculum, but our teachers could not do some of the centers and manipulatives with fidelity because of the social distancing and the situation we were in. So that doesn't totally shock me.
Do we have, are there any benchmarks that would show, like, for other districts that have implemented new curriculum, have they seen the same kinds of drops in some of those areas?
I do know that with new curriculum, you often do see drops before you see, and the reason for that is you have a totally different level of rigor that the kids are not accustomed to. I know that some of the teachers said, well, this is really hard for the kids, right? But it's green rated curriculum that we're putting in front of them now. And again, it's going to take us some time to get the kids accustomed to that curriculum. And I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, it was just it's an odd year to kind of set the benchmark for a new curriculum when you can't even really implement it fully the way that it's intended to be implemented. So, like, same with the science, they were in year 1 of a new hands-on inquiry-based science program, but a lot of the labs they were not able to do. So, in many ways, it's almost like this is year 1 with the new curriculum. Like the math manipulatives, those all came in the beginning of this year. They didn't even have access to them last year.
One of the things that blew me away about the report out for the summer program, I might not get this completely accurate, right? But I think it was 53% of the kids in math saw an improvement. Well, that's basically telling you 50% went through the program and didn't improve, right? And then I think it was 90% stayed the same or improved, and 10% went essentially backwards, right? And I'm not knocking the program, I just think it goes to the challenge, especially around math, that we seem to have. It kind of floored me a little bit.
Yeah. So just to go back, I don't know if you can go back to the grade 5 science slide, Mrs. Sylvia, but the grade 5 science, we were up. And again, science is going to be a struggle because it has not been a focus at the elementary level. And now they come to grade 5 and they're expected to take an MCAS test, but it was the first year of using Amplify, which was a green-rated curriculum, and I thought pretty good for the first year,
Yeah.
you know?
And one thing we kind of know about that grade level in that subject area was there was a long-term substitute in that position who was not, she was a former social studies teacher in the district. So what did she do with that program? She followed it with fidelity. And so, we did perform better than the state, and it's just, I guess it leaves you wondering, what would that have looked like if she didn't have that resource, or what would it have looked like if she were able to do all of the labs and everything. And, again, it's kind of a weird baseline year for the new curriculum.
So why don't we go over some of the considerations? I think that's what we're talking about now.
Yeah, so I guess the question, were there varying levels of fidelity with the new curriculum implementation? Were there varying levels of SEL, sense of belonging in the classrooms? Students were not moving from class to class at the middle school like they normally do. Again, the science curriculum, they were not doing hands-on labs and group work, and that program is really designed for the group conversations and thinking and problem solving. There's no currently, so for this year, we purchased Mystery Science for the science curriculum at the elementary school, and we thought it would kind of be a good holdover until we select a new, full science program. But even, prior to this year, they didn't have that access to really anything. And teachers were kind of generating their own, coming up with what they can find. With the implementation of the new ELA program this year, it would have been a little bit overwhelming to do social science and the ELA. So they'll have Mystery Science for this year. But, come mid-year, we're going to start really looking at high-quality curricular resources for the elementary school to select to put in place for next school year. And then
again, all
another.
these things take time, piloting and getting the teachers involved, and we can't do it all in 1 year. So we've really had to space out adopting some of these new programs.
And ideally, you want to be on an adoption cycle where not everything is coming due in the same year or two. So we want to kind of space these things out so that we're consistently looking at it and making decisions, but not all at once, because it is a really heavy lift for a school to take on, or a district to take on new curriculum. There's a lot of training and support that needs to be in place. And then another consideration is just, are the testing environments consistent across the district? Are there 2 proctors in every classroom? Should the teachers be testing their own students, or maybe they should not be testing their own students? So we're going to be looking at, and we'll get into this with next steps, but looking at some of the DESE recommendations and just making sure that we have consistency and that we're following the recommendations.
So next steps.
So we will, as I said, continue to purchase, pilot new curriculum, train teachers, and ensure that we are implementing the curriculum with fidelity.
And again, I just want to point out that some teachers felt very comfortable at the beginning and went full force with it with fidelity. And we have seen a difference in the test scores already for those teachers that implemented with fidelity versus the ones who did not. So we really are going to be looking at that. The next thing is continue to implement next steps and recommendations with that curriculum audit that we did, so that none of this is lost. This work has continued, and we will continue it.
We want to ensure that the lesson planning process, that the lesson plans have rigor and complexity of tasks.
We want to follow district-wide assessment and pacing guide calendars so that everyone is more or less aligned with the pacing.
We're going to be implementing an attendance campaign to communicate importance of school attendance and to work with families to improve school attendance.
And as Ms. Regari alluded to, or said, we are going to review and update testing procedures district-wide in alignment with what Jesse says we should be doing for regulations when we do these tests. So if that means putting 2 proctors in a classroom or not testing our students, we're going to take a serious look at that. Does anybody have any questions about, and I do want to say that we've already examined a lot of this. There's so much more data to examine with this. And our teachers with the principals, they're working very collaboratively right now to analyze the data and to work on next steps themselves. And again, they take this broad data, they're drilling it down to actually students. What did, Johnny do and where is he at? So it gets drilled down at a much deeper level at the classroom and building level.
And the parent reports were sent home on Friday.
That's correct. Yep. And I believe the elementary is having a meeting about the data coming up to go
Yep.
over the data reports. Does anybody have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I think it would be helpful. These next steps are great, and it would be helpful as we have meetings in the future to remind us of these next steps as a committee and
Yep.
just let us know where we are. The curriculum audit, I know we've been following it, but that, for instance, that was before you were on our committee, Ron.
Yep.
Be helpful to see as a reminder, this is what the audit came up with, and this is where we are.
Okay.
Just
And that, and also, that's a really good point. And that's also kind of part of what was presented. I think all of these things were presented in Dr. Bailey's goals. So just naturally, as part of the process of revisiting the goals, a lot of these, the majority of them anyways, are kind of going to come up through that.
okay.
I think that's right. I agree with Jen. I had the same thought today sometimes on some of this stuff because, we meet monthly and so just to kind of reground ourselves sometimes on some of these things and where we are, I think would be good for the public because it's very easy, at least for me, because we're not here every day, to lose sight of, what we talked about last time or where we are. So that's
So,
just-
for example, in November, one of the things we talked about presenting was the district strategy and how, you already are familiar with it. Some of you are already familiar with it, but we've expanded it based on new data, based on conversations with the administration and teachers. And that's where these goals are coming from. That's where our district strategy is leading us to. So again, it's a 5-year plan, but it's a fluid document, and I'll go over that next month with you.
Not to detract from this comprehensive presentation, have there been studies on the elevated, the numbers of COVID in communities and how it impacts the MCAS scores? Has there been, probably, come from
Yeah, so I think they're looking at that right now, because this is the first year that the children.
But I mean, it's statewide. I mean, if I
Right.
was of the State Department of Education looking at saying, COVID was a certain percentage of level, therefore their MCAS scores were affected.
So when you, I think we can attribute, yeah, I think you can attribute the learning loss when we said that even though we were above the state in many grade levels, we saw an increase in kids not meeting expectations or partially meeting. That, I think we can attribute to the fact that our kids, there was learning loss, right? And I think that DESE has acknowledged learning loss throughout the state, which is why they are promoting this acceleration roadmap that we're pushing right now with our staff and our teachers. You're going to hear more about that as time goes on, but it's all embedded in the goals, in the district strategy. And then the other thing you'll be hearing is the school improvement plans will be presented hopefully on the same night. But you'll see hopefully that there's a thread, a through line between my goals, between the district strategy, the district strategic plan, the school improvement plans, like everything should be in alignment with what we're doing so that someone's not going rogue doing something different, right? We all have that same mission and vision to what we want for our students, and we're going to review that with you next month.
Because
But to say that there's been a specific study, I don't think they have numbers yet, because this data just came out.
No, right. What the COVID numbers affect the emotional health of the community. The higher the numbers, the studies I've seen, that in turn affects the emotional health percentage-wise. So therefore, you're not dealing just with a curriculum problem. You may, you have to analyze to say, okay, we may have this issue of emotional health, anxieties and so forth that happen with COVID, that in turn we have to address those issues rather than just a curriculum issue. This is for the.
Right, so part of the clinical team is they take this, and then they work on the social emotional lens of their goals,
Right.
which will address that. And you'll be hearing reports from the clinical team or from our Director of Student Services. Absolutely.
And I just want to add one more thing, that, for grades 3 to 6,
I'm sorry.
our district showed higher achievement levels compared to the state. And I think that's and so even though there was learning loss, I think we expected to see learning loss.
Right.
But that, I think it's a testament to the hard work that went into keeping our schools open and running. I think when we're comparing ourselves to the state, we're talking about some school districts that were not in person for, pretty
right.
much almost the full year. So, there were, I thought that was kind of good news, a silver lining. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on that?
No.
Okay, and the last thing, other items that may not have been anticipated at the time of the posting of the agenda. I just wanted to give you a quick update on the Test and Stay program.
Yes, thank you.
Sure. So, happy to report that all saliva kits and nasal kits have been received. The nasal, of course, is the backup to the saliva test. We're
So
proceeding.
we had 50% or more demand where parents completed a form saying they were okay with their child being a
Yep,
part of this
so the
program.
consents, total number of students, and it's enough to get us started with the program, 278, total staff 43. So according to CIC, which is the organization, we have enough to get started actually tomorrow.
Okay.
So it will begin tomorrow morning. The space itself is set up in both schools, so we have designated spaces for this to happen. Testing should be starting this week in both schools, and we're going to see how it goes. But we had to wait for those tests to come in, and I can tell you that in talking to many superintendents across the state, it's been a struggle to get this coordinated, to get the test in. The demand for this right now is so high in all the districts. Everyone is doing this. So districts are really struggling to kind of get this program up and running. So we have experienced a delay, but I am happy to say that we should be starting tomorrow.
I'm curious of the parents that responded. So you said we had 200 and
78.
said they wanted their child to be a part of the program. How many parents didn't respond at all? I mean, did we get a good?
Yeah, so can I call Ms. Betancourt to the podium? I don't know if you know that information off the
curious,
top of your head.
How many maybe didn't respond at all? And
So on my end, I can only see who responded, but I can tell you that I only had about a dozen parents respond to the survey that we sent with questions. So anybody that had a question, I answered, but I can only see the positive responses, not people who didn't
It goes
respond
to
or responded
CIC.
no.
right,
Yeah.
okay, so, okay.
Yeah.
I think this is just anecdotal information for you guys. So I think after we talked about it at the last school committee meeting, I ran into 3 or 4 families after the meeting. And those particular families they didn't hear the message, or they didn't quite understand what we were talking about. So some walked away thinking they were going to get the thing jammed up all the way up the nose. Some folks didn't really see it or get it. So I only say that to say if there are parents out there who didn't sign up, I don't know what we're thinking about doing in terms of continuing to educate, but I think there might be an opportunity there to continue to help people understand.
And I think a piece of it was that we have chosen to adopt all three components of the program. So the symptomatic testing, the pool testing, and the follow-up testing. And some people want one element and not all three. And right now, we're asking for consent for all three components of the program. And I think if down the road we see that, the program's still not growing, we may look at splitting those out and just doing symptomatic testing. We may just do, two elements of the program. So I think once we get running the program, seeing the reception and how, are all three components really necessary? Are we seeing an uptick in cases? This is the first day in the last 3 weeks I have not gotten a notification of one case. So that's
good.
It's good for everybody, but scary for me because I don't know, is somebody not symptomatic in our buildings?
And
So I think this will help us.
correct me if I'm
with that.
wrong, Ms. Betancourt, but if a child, let's just say a family chose not to sign up,
Mm-hmm.
and let's say the child is now deemed a close contact, can't they have that choice?
They can choose to then consent
To
to the
consent.
program, yes.
So that's the good news, because
It's a
nobody
rolling
wants their
consent.
child to be home. The whole point of this is to keep children in school.
Mm-hmm.
So they can consent throughout as we go along. So I think word will spread
Mm-hmm.
that
But
it's
they would
not.
have to go to the site to do that.
Everything has to be done through
Yeah,
that
we would
site.
direct them, though.
Right, but,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I can resend out the link, or post it, I think it's posted on our website.
Yeah, okay, so it's on the website.
Yeah,
And
and if
maybe
people
word
need
of
the
mouth.
information, they can call
I think
me.
it's good, because definitely the people I talked to didn't realize it wasn't invasive, essentially, right?
Right.
And so.
And the
they
kids
had-
self-swab. It's not a deep nasal swab. And the kids, they're saying even to kindergarten level, they can swab themselves if we have to use the nasal swab. So I think it's going to be much less invasive than we were seeing with what the town was offering us with the nasal swabs. But we're going with saliva as our primary, and that's fine. And we'll go from there. Our little
We're all
ones don't know how to
learning. This is
spit,
new
but
for
we're going to
everybody.
teach them.
So any questions about that,
No?
test and stay?
Thank you
I
for
just
that
thought it was
update.
important to give you an update on that. And that is all I have for this evening.
Okay, thank you.
It's enough, right?
All right, Mrs. Flynn, you're on.
Okay, I have a quick update for tonight. So you have your typical materials in the packet. I will go over them briefly, and certainly if you have any questions, we can take those. The first document that you have is the budget update to the school committee. So that just shows our major budget accounts. And again, as we get more into the year, we'll add some of the other accounts. For example, utilities, facilities, technology, as we start seeing some changes there. So these are our main ones. Right out of the gate, of course, we know salaries because we have our people hired. I believe Mr. Howcroft, you had asked a question to Dr. Bailey, and she had said we would address it now. So the question was, were there any vacancies from this at this time period? So we don't have any new vacancies from a month ago. We still do have some positions that were budgeted for that have not been filled. The good news is we have filled 3 since last month that affect the local budget. Those would have been your 2 nurses and a paraprofessional. And we also filled 3 that affect grants and funds, which were your cafeteria helpers and the grant-funded custodian. So as of right now, we still do have, looking at the report, 6 positions in the local budget that were budgeted for, but not yet filled. So that's where the majority of our salary surplus comes from. So from month to month, if and when those positions are filled, you'll see changes here, and you'll see that the overall balance most likely decline because we'll be hiring people for these positions. So we still do have 6 in the local budget that were again budgeted for but not yet filled. And we are still looking for 1 position in our grants and funds, which is a maintenance technician. We did have someone, I believe, come through the building today and express interest. So we are still hoping to hire for most of those positions. And then you also see the high school tuitions. We had our October 1 roster we received from Fairhaven High. I'm still waiting to hear from New Bedford High. So we do have a few more students that are attending Fairhaven High than we budgeted for. And so we will know once we get the invoice from Fairhaven High how that shakes out, because some of these students may have tuitions that we don't know exactly. We do know the regular education tuition, but we don't know the special education tuition. So once we get more information from Fairhaven and New Bedford, I'll be able to have a more accurate number for you. And then that may change throughout the year as we have students come into our high schools or leave our high schools. We also have the out-of-district tuition. We talked a little bit about that last month. The important thing to note is we do have some potential placements pending, so that number may change between now and the next few months because we do have some placements that are pending. So we'll keep you updated on that. And again, transportation sometimes goes along with tuition. If we get more students in that we have to transport, obviously that line will change as well. So we'll keep a watch on that. I included the budget summary, which is kind of a summary of our year-to-date expenditures for, the group together the major line items. That's just the update for this month.
Sloan, can I ask
Yes.
a quick question
Yes.
about transportation?
Yes.
Have we seen a lot of students returning to bus use? I know a lot of students during the hybrid were becoming, their parents are driving their kids to school. Have we seen that return?
I believe we've seen some. I can get that look. I don't know specifically, but I believe, of course, at this time last year, we had cohorts. So we were fortunate that we didn't have a transportation crunch because enough parents willingly brought their children to school and they were separated on the days. So we've certainly seen a return to more students at any one time riding the buses, but how it compares to say where we were maybe 2 years ago, I'd have to do a little bit of
I was just curious.
research
Yeah.
on that.
Just another question on
Yes.
placements. Did the participants at Old Colony, in the budget, there was an increase, planned increase, but we really wouldn't have been finalized until the fall as far as the number of, students going to Old Colony? I don't know if you have any figure on that. I know it's not within your...
I don't, my office doesn't really have
Right, I
that
know.
information. Maybe that's something that the superintendent's office has for the numbers of students attending Old Colony.
Whether the increase is planned did in turn, take place. That's
Right,
what-
I'm not sure, because we don't, the business
know.
office, the school budget doesn't pay
You-
for Old Colony, so I don't track that, but that's certainly some information that I believe Dr. Bailey's office may have.
More of a curiosity.
Yes.
All
So we
right, we'll
can
get
look at
that for you.
So just real quick, I included, every month I like to include some other aspect of the school finance update that, to let you all know about. This month I included our grants update. So this is a look at all of the school grants that we received, and most of these, or if not all of them, are what are called entitlement grants. So that the amount is predetermined by the state, and you have to apply for them, and it's certainly a very long and rigorous application that I know Ms. Regari did a lot of work on for us this year. So, but we were able to get these grants, and most of them are in the approval process, if not have already been approved. So I gave you a quick, summary of what the grant targets and how much we're receiving this year versus last year and the overall change. So looking at it, we are set to receive an additional 5 new grants, but 4 have dropped off. Now, all of these are all grants that seem to have something to do with the coronavirus in response to COVID. So we've received some more money, and then some other grants were just 1 year only. So altogether, we're getting a total increase of about $670,000 in grants from last year to this year. And our total grants together come up to $1.5 million, a little over $1.5 million in grants. And that's in addition to our $15 million local budget. Also with that, our school funds update, in addition to the local budget, which we vote on at town meeting, the grants, which we get from the federal and state governments. We also have our own revolving funds, our school funds. So I've added those here. The balance, I've listed the balances as of year end, which is June 30th. So you have a separate sheet for that. And the sheet details all of the funds that we have, a description, where the revenues come from, and what the expenses are. And some of these are they're stipulated by municipal law. So for example, at the top is school lunch revolving. That one's easy. It's the operation of our school lunch program. The revenues come from what meal sales. We're not selling meals anymore because everything is free. So this year and last, we get our revenues from the federal and state reimbursements. And our expenses are wages and cost of food and supplies, equipment. So the fund balance as of June 30th was about $327,000. Now, DESI regulations want you to have at least 3 months of expenditures on hand, which is where we were pre-pandemic. But because of all of the injection of, the reimbursements, Mrs. Sheridan and her department have done a great job at maximizing those and getting those meals out to kids so we can in turn claim the reimbursement. Our school lunch revolving balance has really grown over the years because we've really benefited from some funds that come into the school from the federal and state government to do with the coronavirus, and also all of the reimbursements. And you'll see at the end, I'll just talk about it quickly now. In school lunch, we just were notified we got an additional $34,255 as in help to respond to the pandemic based on last year. So that's unrestricted. That goes into the program just to cover expenditures. So it's just an example of the funds that we're getting, we continue to get. You can see some other funds we have: Special Ed Circuit Breaker, Ford Middle School Fund, which is for student activities for Ford Middle School students, Elementary School Fund, similar for the elementary school, School Building Rental, which is upkeep of facilities. We get revenues from renting out our facilities for that. And then we can use that for any custodial cost, repairs, maintenance. We use some of the funds to upkeep the playgrounds, for example. So in that balance, that's one of our larger ones with school lunch. There's about $101,000 in that account. So we have several more. So our total fund balances as of June 30th are $1,047,558. So that's just another component of school finance. So that's all I have for school finance budget. Does anyone have any questions on that at this time? Great. So real quick, just a quick facilities update. We did hire the SR2 grant-funded custodian. He started today. So I believe other than the maintenance position, we are full staff. We have everybody back to work that's been on leave. So we are, I think for the first time in a long time, fully staffed, and actually where we were before the pandemic hit, we're up one person, so that's great. We did some custodial training last week. We staff started to rent the facilities again to basketball, cheering, and scouts. They've all taken out applications, so that's good news. We're moving in the right direction with having our communities back in the building. We're looking at phase 3 of the soccer field. So at some point, I would like to have AYSA in to talk to you all about what they have planned for phase 3. Phase 2 is complete. As you can see, the grass is coming in. So we are moving on to phase 3. We're trying to get those storage containers emptied as soon as possible to get, all of the furniture and equipment that the teachers need back into their classrooms, get the ugly trailers off the property, and stop paying rent on them. So I know the custodians have been hard at work at trying to squeeze that into the little time that they do have. And finally, the AES roof replacements, filed sub-bids came in, so those come in first. And then on October 21st, we'll have the bid opening for the general contractor. Now, as you know, we rebid this from last May due to the major supply delays and shortages. So the bids are a little higher than they were last May, but they're still under what was estimated for the project cost for the filed sub-bids. So I'll be able to give you a better picture once the general contractor bid comes in at the end of the month. So the sub-bids are for plumbing, which Arujo Brothers, an Acushnet-based company, was the lowest bidder, and DDS Industries of Fall River was the low bid for the HVAC component. Everything else will be done by the general contractor, and again, that bid opening is October 21st. So finally, school lunch update, as Mrs. Sheridan talked about, we're really maximizing our meal offerings of providing meals. So in September, we provided a total of just over 9,000 breakfast meals and a little over 10,000 lunch meals to our students. So really can't compare this September to last September because we didn't have many students in the building for the month of September, but it certainly is up more than, as she mentioned, than it was 2 years ago at this time. So, and again, those reimbursements are really helping with our net income. And I did quickly talk about the emergency operating costs payments. Again, that was just over $34,000 that we received recently to our school meals program. So that's just a quick update of finance, operations, facilities, school nutrition. Anybody have any
I have
questions?
a very random question
Yes.
for you. Are there grants available that, because you were talking about the soccer field, just, John, are there grants available that could be used for, like, if we ever wanted to think about redoing basketball courts and that kind of thing?
I think next month we'll have a presentation about that. That is part of what we are looking at in one of our, in the ESSER 3 grant, I believe. That's part of what we're looking at to spend that money on. So I know that's in the works. That application is currently, I believe, under consideration. It's been completed and submitted, and it's under consideration from DESE. I know at the business managers conference I was at, they said that they are working as fast as possible to get everybody's applications approved so that they can start using them. But that is a focus of that. That is one of the components.
And while Mrs. Flynn gave you an overview tonight of all the grants, a general overview, next month, we're planning on really getting a little deeper into these ESSER funds because it is quite a bit of money, and we did a survey. We want to let you know what those survey results yielded and also tell you about what the plans are.
And when you say, who did you survey?
All
The parents?
stakeholders,
Oh, yeah,
school
gotcha.
committee, we surveyed families, students, teachers. Community members.
Yep, that was recent.
Yeah, that was
I
pretty
remember that one
recent.
coming out
I wonder
recently,
if I
yeah.
saw that or not.
Yep.
I think you may have, because we had 5 school committee members respond.
Well, I guess I voted on it then.
So I'm thinking
Been late.
everybody on the committee did respond to that. But there's so many surveys that come
There are a
out,
lot of
you know.
surveys, but it's good, and it's convenient to take, where you can just sort of be looking at your phone and do it quickly.
Clearly, I'm taking them when I'm half asleep.
And that's what I alluded to earlier, was really, we're getting really good information
Yeah.
from these surveys
No, it's
because a lot of
great.
people are taking them, so.
And it's Google Forms, so they're pretty smartphone friendly, that, like I said,
Yes.
you could just be real quick, while you're watching TV, look at the survey and take it.
That's
So
right.
it's easy for families to be engaged, which is great. All right, that's it. Mrs. Flynn, for you, right?
That's it.
Okay, so school committee member reports. I will just mention, because I got an email recently about the ATA trunk or treat that's happening on October 23rd. So just want to remind families about that it's happening from 2 to 4 on the 23rd. So want to put a plug for that great event happening. And then we have some communication and information. We have letters noted here that were in our packet to families. We're not going to get into those. No executive session tonight,
So, excuse me, can I just make?
Oh, sure.
Madam Chair, one note about the communication.
Sure.
You have in there a field trip request for information. I just wanted to let the committee know that, as you know, due to the pandemic, we have not been having field trips. So this is sort of our test one. This is an outdoor field trip. It's aligned to the standards. You'll see it's Patriots Place. But we wanted to try it out and see how we do with it. So I just wanted to let you know that's in the works. And if it goes well, and we, use good judgment on the types of field trips that come forth, as long as we follow the indoor and outdoor rules and regulations, we would like to continue with allowing these. But I just wanted to let you know that, we are turning the corner a bit with field trips, so.
Great.
That's a STEM, isn't that a STEM, isn't there a STEM event there too, and they're going?
Yes, it's a
something,
STEM
yeah.
activity.
That's
They
great.
are, they rotate between an interactive tour of the museum, it's the Patriots Hall of Fame, and the STEM activity.
Okay.
So it's something that they've done every year. It's grade 7. This is a yearly trip that the students enjoy. So I just wanted to let you know, when you saw that, we are trying this to see how it goes.
Great. All right, so if there's nothing further from my fellow members, if I could request a motion, please, to adjourn our meeting this evening.
Also move.
Second?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Our next meeting will be on Tuesday, November 9th, here at the library at the school.
Oh,